Being lonely is actually alienation or feeling separated from something you know you're meant to be a part of. And that's really what's going on right now. And I can't wait to actually get to the reasons why we're experiencing this so emphatically in our culture right now. Because the alienation is we're alienated from something we're supposed to be connected to. We're separated from something we're supposed to be united to. What is that something and what is it for?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another episode here at The Catholic Gentleman. We are excited to come to you today. I am John Heinen. We've got Sam Guzman and Devin Shad. We are all the hosts here on The Catholic Gentleman Show, coming to you every single week talking about issues as they relate to men. Today we get to actually talk about a question that comes frequently to us, and it's that please discuss loneliness in the lives of men. And the Surgeon General, put out a document last year on the epidemic of loneliness as it affects us here in the United States of America. And when you look at that, we can see that men are at the highest of the chart for suicide, as well as loneliness-related addictions. So it seems pretty serious. Today, we discuss this, and most importantly, how we as men can handle loneliness in our lives and in the lives of our fellow brothers. We also get to answer a question from a listener about what are some red flags that you should be looking for while dating. He's in his 20s, and I look forward to answering that. We love answering your questions. So if you have one, please send it to us at podcast@catholicgentleman.com. You can do an audio recording. We'll actually play the audio recording here live. Send it over there at podcast@catholicgentleman.com. And if you enjoy this public edition of the episode and you want to go in deeper, head over to Catholic Gentleman Plus. It's a great way to support us, but every single week we're coming out with a more extended version of this episode, as well as each month coming out with sessions as they relate to men on spirituality, on physical, on emotional, mental, things like that within the mind and heart of the church. So head over to Catholic Gentleman Plus, where today, actually, we're going to get to talk about things like how to love ourselves appropriately, how to love God appropriately, and why these things matter in the heart and mind of men as it relates to loneliness. So if you have been listening to us, please click that like, subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whichever podcast player you're listening to. Click that 5 stars. It helps get that algorithm out to more people. So here we are. Just get things going. Surgeon General, it's called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. It was an 82-page document that came out last year on this issue of the rise of loneliness and isolation here in America. And it goes through a lot of different things. And I was able to go through that document because we see after the pandemic that we just all went through an even increased rise, but it didn't just start in 2020. It's actually been something that we are seeing over the last 20, if not 40 years. You can see this trajectory of loneliness and how it's defined. I pulled out a couple stats that I think are really important for us to look at. Today, here in 2024, suicide is at an all-time high. So it had an up in 80, then it dropped down in the 90s, and then it's been just steadily growing. And then the last 3 years, we see an even further uptick in suicide, which is really sad. And let us pray for all those that are grieving the loss of a close loved one, right? Because that pain is then spread to all those here who loved them or who knew them. And so we keep them in our prayers. But when I'm looking at those frequency of suicide over the last 20 years, I think it's important to note that 79% of the cases, just shy, are men. That's a big deal. 21% are women, but 79% are men. Couple this with research on marriage and how fewer men are actually getting married. And the average age of marriage is grown now from 2010 at 27 years to now 2024, 14 years later, it's at just over 30 years, 30.2 years to be exact, is the average age that men are getting married. Why is that important? Well, one of the ways to combat loneliness is to have people in your life, people that love you and that you love. And so that's really important. One big stat that this Surgeon General document came out that I think is really important for us to dialogue about here is the fact that social engagement with friends on a weekly basis has gone down from in 2000 and I don't have it right in front of me. It's 20 years. It's 2003. it was at 60 hours a week was the average amount of social engagement with friends, has actually dropped to less than 20 hours a week for men. And so obviously the friends on Facebook don't count as that in-person physical social engagement. And so while that might be replacing it, it's actually not satisfactory to our lives as men. 57% of Americans today see themselves addicted to their phones. 75% admit that they feel very uncomfortable and awkward without their phone next to them. And to date, here in America, 97% of all phone users have a smartphone in their pocket or in their purse. And so all of this comes into this epidemic of loneliness into this document. And so, I'm going to turn quickly to you, Sam, as the mental health counselor in the room, because this is important, something you deal with, and ask you, fact or fiction, is loneliness an epidemic that's upon us here in America? And how are you seeing that within your practice?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I see it all the time, in a one-to-one level in my counseling practice. But I would say, zooming out a little bit, it is something that has a massive effect on our sense of well-being. I mean, you can have a lot of wealth, you can have a nice car, you can have a big house, like you can have all the things the world tell you are going to make you happy. But if you don't have interpersonal connections, none of that's going to mean anything. And you're still going to find this deep ache in your heart and loneliness that that longing for connection is one of the key indicators for mental health. If you can go through a lot of hardship, a lot of struggles, but if you know that there are people in your life that care about you, they're there to support you, they're there to back you up, they've got your back no matter what, you can get through almost anything. As long as you are connected to others, that you're important in the lives of others. But on the flip side of that, and I don't remember the statistic right in front of me, John, maybe you do, but I remember the general social survey that the government does just on the overall health and well-being of Americans, said something like 60% of Americans say they have no one to call on in a crisis if something bad happens to them. There's no one there for them. They have nobody. They
it's actually higher.
family.
I saw that statistic. Only 16% state that they do. So doing the reverse of that, it's actually 84%. But the statistic in that document is only 16% state that they have somebody just like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you look just at the psychological perspective, your survival brain, your amygdala, being activated because you feel literally like your life is in danger because you have no one to support you.
Yeah.
And it creates a massive amount of stress and anxiety that can even have physical health consequences. Blood pressure increases, and inflammation, chronic pain, all of those things get worse when you feel alone and isolated. So all that to say, not to be bleak and depressing, but this is a very real issue. This is not just something that's well, if I get around to it someday, no, you need to be taking this aspect of your life and your person seriously because it affects your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. And so that's why we thought it was very important to talk about this today.
Yeah. And I don't want to remove the elephant in the room here is that the pandemic did exacerbate, if you will. It highlighted, these issues, right? Where we had to be 6 feet apart from even the people that we love and that we were used to, having a hug. I heard that there's these different, hug spots, right? Where people just sit there and give other people hugs, right? Because, as one way to try and solve this loneliness epidemic that's upon us. And so while it was already on the rise, and I think we have reasons that are not just correlation, but rather causation that we want to talk about today, it is important to note that, when we are separated and we are not in that interpersonal relationships with people, not only does it have mental and emotional effects on us, it also has physical effects on our lives. In fact, in that document, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was something like those who feel isolated and lonely, have an exponential increase in early death, as well as a shorter lifespan, right? Obviously, earlier death, shorter lifespan. They gave, two different metrics associated with that, because it does really have this physical toll on our body. And so one of the first directions that I wanted us to dialogue about with is kind of the breakdown of the family and how that is affecting loneliness. And so, Devin, I'd love to turn it over to you just right here at the beginning to talk about this understanding of the family and how, as that is breaking down, it's affecting the lives of men that are coming into adulthood and then trying to move forward and create bonds and create relationships themselves. And I'd love to get your thoughts on just that effect of the family.
Well, the family is the incubation environment for us to learn how to love sacrificially and how to enter into relationship. And so when you have no-fault divorce being legalized, when you have divorce that has increased over, the decades, and you have the rupture of the family, and then really you have these people, all of us, who are growing up in this family dynamic where we're not learning relationship. We're not learning how to communicate. We're not learning how to actually serve one another and love one another. And so when you have that, and then you go into the world and you go in the world with that lack of knowledge, and then you're afraid of the world. And so there's nothing that keeps us safer than staying behind your smartphone, and social platforms create social distancing. I can hide behind my, little, my pic, and I can hide behind my bio and all that stuff. And I can look really, really good, and I can maintain this distance. And so I think Paul VI said that in Nazareth, he wants to go back to Nazareth so he can learn the language of familial love, self-giving love. And that's one of the reasons why we're in the situation we're in today, is because we're not learning that at home, and therefore it compounds and exponentially becomes more difficult when we enter the world. But I want to go back to something you said earlier that I find fascinating. Did you say in 2003, 60 hours of friendship a week, and then in 2018 or whatever it was, 20 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to be, I want to ask you guys, like, how many hours a week do you guys actually spend with friends?
62. No, I wouldn't have a marriage if I did that. And it does raise that question too, where what were the age groups and what have you. But yeah, no, not at all. I would say, and this is important too, right? Like, let's think about my life before marriage, right? My life before marriage, I spent a lot of time, in college and stuff like that, hanging around friends. I don't know if it would say like, what is six? That must be monthly. I'm gonna have to look at that statistic. You're exactly right, because there's no way I was spending 10 hours a day with friends.
Here's why I asked. Why I asked, because after I got that stat, I called up a whole bunch of friends. Okay, and these are friends that I don't hang out with on a weekly basis. So I call up these guys, text these guys, and say, "Hey, how much time do you spend with friends on a weekly basis?" And you know what? Almost all of them said 0.
Wow.
It's amazing. And these guys are good guys. These guys are great men who are really striving for holiness. And these are guys who consider me a good friend. And the last time I've met with them for coffee or whatever has been like months. And so there's a serious issue here.
There really is. And actually, I did look it up. It is monthly. So forgive me, all the listeners. I'm glad that you called this out. It's 60 hours a month versus 20 hours a month, which is still, going
still 5 hours a week.
Exactly. And versus 0. And I would agree with you. I'm certainly not currently spending 5 hours a week with friends. What about you, Sam? Do you have your guy time a couple nights a week?
No, I wouldn't say it's that frequent. There's definitely times when I wish it was, but I wouldn't say it's even 5 hours a week. No, I would be interested to know what they're considering interaction with friends. Are they counting like, texting or whatever? Like, because that doesn't count. But maybe they're counting that in the 5 hours or something. But yeah, I'm not that high either.
No, yeah, agreed. But zero is an issue, right? Because I think, Devin, what you're getting at, right, is we men need each other, right? And we do. Even within family, sure, we've got our wives and we've got our children and everything, but married men know that you can feel lonely inside of your family. I mean, I've reached out to both these men here on the podcast before. Yeah, Devin.
I before I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, I remember I went to a Led Zeppelin concert. Well, it was Page and Plant concert, Led Zeppelin resurrected, and
Wow.
with arthritis and depends on. But anyway, I mean, it was still pretty good. But I went to a U2 concert, and I remember being surrounded by tens of thousands of human beings and feeling very alone, very isolated. And I think what we're experiencing as men is you can be around people all the time at work. You could be around people, in the marketplace, in business, but that does not mean that you're not lonely. Being lonely is actually alienation or feeling separated from something you're meant to be or meant to be a part of. And that's really what's going on right now. And I can't wait to actually get to the reasons why we're experiencing this so emphatically in our culture right now. Because the alienation is we're alienated from something we're supposed to be connected to. We're separated from something we're supposed to be united to. What is that something? And what is it for? That's the hole in the human heart that we're trying to feed right now, or at least address right now.
Yeah, agreed. Sam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is, the causes, we'll get to that, and I think that'll be a very interesting discussion. But the human mind, yes, in the spiritual sense, but also in the physical makeup of our brain, we're wired for connection. This is not an accident, It's like if you try driving your car down the street with the parking brake on, eventually there's going to be a lot of friction, a lot of heat, because that's not how it's designed to operate. But likewise with the human being, like we're just our fundamental makeup, and of course John Paul II goes into this in a beautiful way in Theology of the Body and talking about our other orientedness, for lack of a better word. We're made for communion with others. Even the fact that we have eyes, we have ears, we have a mouth, that are all designed to communicate and bring communion with other people. Our whole makeup is oriented towards that. So if the thing we have to realize is it's going to be very hard to live our vocation, to be Christ followers, to be Christians, to follow those injunctions to love one another. If we have 0 hours of friendship a week, there's deep spiritual implications here. And so again, we can't trivialize this. We can't put this on the back burner where it's like, well, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to make my money. I'm going to come home and crash. And one of these days when things slow down or I have more time, then I'll prioritize friendship.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. How much money, let's say you're ill, you have a serious physical illness. How much money would you pay to have the health of a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old? Imagine you have a debilitating behavioral mental health issue, depression, anxiety, whatever it is, OCD, whatever it is, schizophrenia. How much would you pay for that to go away? Yeah. Well, these things, mental health disorders, physical health disorders, they are rooted in the fact that we don't have companionship.
Yes.
How much then would you pay or how much would you sacrifice to have companions? Because this is at the heart of everything. It is not good that man is alone. We've said this before, but in the Hebrew, so this is God's design. This isn't our design. Yes, it's very human. Yes, it's built in. We're hardwired for it. Why? Because God created this way. But when God said it is not good that man is alone, that Hebrew word is abadad, which literally means bad. It's the only time in the creation count that God said that something's bad is when man is isolated and alienated and separated.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I love that. And I think that it's so important for us to remember here as Catholic men is that in Genesis 2:18, that's actually why, if you're watching the video, I was glancing to the side to grab the exact scripture before Devin just mentioned it. We were on the same wavelength here. Is that, and the Lord said, right? It is not good that man should be alone. That's Genesis 2:18. That's right at the beginning of scripture, right at the beginning of the Bible, is that he knew that. And so he put a sleep over Adam. And then, what did he do? He created Eve. Please. Yeah. Go for it,
Yeah,
Devin.
and
Yeah.
why? Why? Why is it not good that man is alone? Because man is made in the image and likeness of God and is made for God. And what is God? God is an eternal relationship, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, an eternal exchange of love. God wants us to experience what he is, which is companionship. He wants us to experience that joy and that love that is the fruit of companionship and self-giving. This is God's design. It's embedded in our humanity. And psychologists and psychotherapists can talk about it all day long, but this is the way God has designed it because it's who he is and who we are in his image.
Yeah. And I think that this just goes back now to this breakdown of the family, right? Which is something that we brought up frequently, but Satan knows this. Satan knows this from the beginning, and he has done a phenomenal job over the last 100 years. It's just not been over the last 3 years, right? It has been something that he has been working towards, forever. And, and we have the sexual revolution, and we have all of these different things that have just highlighted and exploded this issue. But, and one of the things I like to talk about and like to think about is the fact that we've got these nuclear families today, right? So, well, I guess before we get there, we've got less marriages, as I mentioned earlier. We've got fewer children, as I mentioned earlier. And then the one thing that I like to talk about that I don't think we spend enough time speaking about is this isolation of the nuclear family that is now isolated because of the Industrial Revolution. So over the last 100+ years, has been isolated from multi-generational homes. So this idea that we used to have our parents directly there to turn to, or at least across the street, or in, not even the street, but, across the ranch, to help us with a better understanding, struggles and helping out with the kids and helping out with our lives. And then our brothers and sisters, we would be able to help out with those things. And so then we were sold this sort of image of like, well, you can be whatever you want, you can form whatever you want. And so then we've got now generations upon generations upon generations that have lacked that multi-generational structure of learning from your parents, not just in the first 18 years of life, but also still learning from them and their experiences after you would start having kids of your own and you're in still need of that support and that guidance. We no longer have that because now we can move wherever we want. We can take whatever job wherever we want. We can, live in an apartment in the inner city. We can live in our nice suburban home here. And it's interesting, and it has to be interesting for people to reflect on the fact that we are, spatially speaking, closer to people than ever before in these suburban communities, technologically speaking, more connected to people than ever before. Yet loneliness is on the rise. Yet loneliness and isolation is on the rise because it's been fractured, because how we were created in the image and likeness of God has been fractured. So Sam, I want to turn it over to you. I want you to talk a little bit about family and this breakdown of the family and ways that you're seeing that this is affecting men's need for, interpersonal relationships.
Yeah. Well, to me, it goes back to this lens of attachment, and I don't want to get too far afield here, but John Bowlby was this therapist who kind of spent a lot of time focusing on families and how children develop emotionally, and he developed this concept called attachment theory, and he talks about I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but you think about a baby, right? Like they're helpless, but they come out of the womb and their mother holds them to her breast, right? And like immediately the baby, it's a full sensory experience, right? She's getting these pheromones from the mother. He's getting, the warmth of her skin, that the smell of her body, like all of these things. It's like a very visceral experience, but it immediately creates this connection. And they say that newborn babies can only see, and it's very interesting, the precise distance is from the mother's eye to the baby's eye. That's as far as a baby can see. Everything beyond that is just blurry and unfocused. Why is that? Because eye contact creates a profound sense of connection. So immediately, if a baby comes into the world and they experience that connection, and then they're crying, and then the mother comes and feeds them and takes care of them. Or fast forward a few years, the baby falls, or the child now falls and scrapes their knee when they're learning to ride a bike. and dad comes and comforts them and says, it's all right, you're okay. And like they put a Band-Aid on it and they comfort that kid. And that happens over and over, like thousands of times in the years of growing up. That kid is going to have a profound sense of safety, emotionally, physically, a deep sense of connection, of being loved, of being worthy of love, of being significant, all of these things, right? And in a healthy family, this happens. On the flip side, let's say that never happens. That baby never gets that warmth of their mother's presence. They never get care and comfort when they're upset. They never get emotional regulation through their parents' co-regulation. They don't get any of that stuff. And their fundamental orientation before the world is relationships are dangerous. Relationships equal pain, in fact. I'm alone. I'm isolated in this world, and I have to fend for myself in order to survive. And so your attitude becomes one of suspicion, aggression, hostility, and you don't trust the world and you don't trust other people because you never felt a sense of safety even once in your life, right? And so those are kind of two extremes. And let's acknowledge that no family is perfect.
Right.
And for most people, there's a mixture and hopefully more of the love and care. But the point being, the breakdown of the family has wounded everyone's attachment. And we have a culture that's reeling from broken attachments, whether that's through divorce, whether that's just through parents who were there but were emotionally distant, or who are even emotionally or physically abusive. And so every time I walk out in the world and I see someone like completely covered in tattoos and 100 piercings like bristling all over their face, the thing that immediately my mind goes to is they weren't loved as a child. It's emotional, physical trauma and manifesting physically in your appearance, because that's how a lot of people cope, is trying to find that significance, trying to find that sense of importance and uniqueness that they should have had as a child in a safe and loving home. And so all that to say, I don't want to keep talking. I'll shut up now. But the point being, the breakdown of the family has led to wounded attachment. And wounded attachment is the root of dozens and dozens of different mental health disorders, but yes, even physical health disorders. Your performance in school is affected. Your ability to date and get married is affected. It affects almost every area of your life, your confidence at work. So I would say the breakdown of the family has been absolutely devastating for individuals who are now trying to piece together some kind of life when they don't feel safe, they don't feel loved, they don't feel like they matter or are important to anyone. And their fundamental orientation for the world is one of anxiety, aggression, and distrust.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I really think that's really good because you took from the breakdown. Okay, yeah, so we've got these stats, right? But these stats actually affect individuals and they affect real lives. And giving those examples was really good. Expressing the emotional pains and the emotional wounds that are inflicted by present but absent family or parents or divorced parents or this. But yeah, you not only are saddened by that or grieved by that, but you also start trying to protect yourself from that, and you start worrying about feeling that pain or being hurt, and that becomes this identity within you. And I think that can go for years and years and years if not appropriately corrected and fixed. So one of the other major problems here within our societies that I think we really have to talk about before we go into solutions is the technological advancements and technology within our lives. And so I'd like to move and talk about that, because in addition to, you were mentioning coping mechanisms, which I'd like for you to share a little bit more about, but I want to talk about this reality that we now have phones designed to keep us addicted to them. That's what they're like. The iPhone is designed for you to be addicted to the phone. Social media platforms, which come out on your smartphone, are designed to keep you addicted and returning to them. That's what they're designed, because you're the product, right? If Apple doesn't sell more phones and keep on getting more phones, they're not going to, stock numbers are not going to grow. They're not going to continue to advance. If these social media platforms don't have advertisers coming to it to sell you on different products, then they're not going to be as successful. So, and this has come out over the last, well, I don't know how many years, but the last 7 or 8 years, that, social media platforms can manipulate your emotions. They can manipulate your emotions to the degree. Why? Because they know that some people purchase when they're angry, and some people purchase when they're sad, and some people purchase when they're happy. And so they can actually, through the course of within a minute, identify what your emotion currently is, if they can just start sending you certain ads, or what they need to be doing and what posts they need to be doing to kind of try and trigger your emotions. I mean, it's that wicked. And so all of this to be said is, but here we are. It seems innocuous. We've got, Facebook friends. I've got 4,900 friends. I've got all these friends in my life. Yeah, exactly. And all these people are following me, not just friends, but I've got fans. I mean, and so then we live this life of it's false. It's a fictitious reality that we have kind of placed ourselves in. But these groups knew that they were doing that, and here we have fallen. And so, Devin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on technology. I remember in show prep, you're talking about the external coming in and the ease of that, but also how it's been affecting us in our daily lives. So.
Yeah. In the 1950s, basically, we opened up the roofs of our houses to the satellite feed so that we could be connected to the world. And then that has taken on evolutionary technological forms, from just not only TV programming to, smartphone, social app, addiction. But I think what's going on is it creates in us this sense that we're connected, this sense that we're connected to the world and we know what's going on. No longer do we have to go to the post office or go into town and talk to the neighbors and sit on the porch to find out whatever is happening in the world. No, we can just connect to satellite feed and we'll be connected. But think about this in your own home. I've experienced this, unfortunately, is we're all rooted or designed for companionship. Bread sharing, if you will. We're all designed to share ourselves with one another. And so this device that is basically brainwashing me to be addicted to believing that I'm connected, I'm actually using it and alienating the family that's all around me. So it's actually doing the very opposite. And that's not only even getting into the jealousies and the envies and the resentments and all the stuff that it creates when we post all this false stuff about ourselves and make our lives look all great, but just in our own home, what's apparent connectivity is creating alienation between me and my wife, me and my kids, because we're all in the same spot, but separately connecting to the so-called world with this thing. So I don't want to be like Satan's under every rock.
Right.
And technology's great.
We have smartphones. Yes, exactly.
It's good, right. But Satan is under this rock. He is using it to create alienation in our families. Bottom line, because the family is the icon of the Trinity. It is the family is the perpetual reminder to every human being that God is relationship. So it's a reminder of our identity and our destiny, that we're created in his image and that we're destined to enter into that self-giving love in the Trinity for all eternity, which is going to blow our minds. And yet we're exasperating the whole thing by being on these smartphone devices and not really having any companionship really with anyone.
I agree. And I would just like to quickly turn it over to you, Sam, and talk about this kind of like insidious relationship that we have with our phone, right? Where basically our phone is making us lonely, right? It is isolating us. It's making us lonely. And so where do we turn to kind of fill that void of loneliness? We turn to our phone. We turn to more entertainment, more engagement. Am I right in saying that, Sam, or do we feel like maybe I'm simplifying it to an unnecessary or maybe making it too simple?
Yeah, phones are definitely destroying connections because it gives you a justification for, like you were saying earlier, social withdrawal. So in the past, I think people had social anxiety in the past. People would get anxious, they would feel a little uncomfortable. They would feel a little nervous. Like, let's say, I've seen these pictures of like, a bunch of teenagers at a dance in the 1950s or something. I'm sure people got nervous then, sure. But they also, you didn't really have a lot of options. Even if you were nervous, even if you were like a little uncomfortable in a social setting, you still had to engage eventually, you were kind of forced to confront your own anxiety and push through it and reach out, shake someone's hand, introduce yourself to that girl that you find pretty or whatever. And people would work through it. And there was just a sense of engagement. And of course, I didn't live back then, but I've heard enough from people who did live back then, my grandparents, and my parents, but who lived before cell phones, to know that the world really was that way. It wasn't some airy-fairy ideal. People really were more connected, more willing to engage, more willing to get out of their shell. Whereas now, like, we get that little sense of stranger danger, that little sense of discomfort when we see somebody. But instead of having to face that, overcome that, grow through that, and then get the reward of a relationship or at least meeting someone new, which is a good feeling. It's a good feeling to meet new people, to engage with others, to communicate and receive communication. We're designed for that again. So there's this joyful interplay that happens when you push through that discomfort and stepping out of your shell and into a relationship. But now, the second we feel that danger, we just withdraw straight to our phones. And we miss out on so much potential joy, so much potential connection, because we're hiding. We're hiding behind that. And we looked at the spectrum of addictions. There's really unpopular addictions, like, let's say you're addicted to meth or something like that, or even like pornography it's shameful, even though a lot of people are addicted to it. But phones are socially acceptable. So it's like this addiction that provides the same sense of reward, the same sense of numbing your emotions, and numbing your discomfort with none of the social stigma. So everybody does it and nobody's connected. And it's a real tragedy.
It really is. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, I do. It's a time here in the episode, and it's kind of hard because we want to talk about, and we do inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus today, we talk about our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with God as two really important things to get right, to better understand and in understanding better combat loneliness. But I do want to jump right in and I want to start talking about solutions. So I want to be able to, on this public edition of the episode, talk about some solutions and some ways of overcoming loneliness in the lives of men. And so I see it kind of in two major categories. Is you, one, as a man who might be experiencing loneliness and ways that you can better help yourself, as well as you as a man who maybe aren't struggling from loneliness, but knowing that our world is, and they're in need of the light, right? They're in need of the love that you have to offer, and they're in need of that ability for you to expand beyond that. And so, Devin, I'd love for you to start and talk a little bit about solutions as they relate to loneliness in the lives of men.
So when we're talking about practical solutions, first of all, what I want to say is that the world's approach will never work.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the beauty of Christianity. Christianity has the right approach here, and it is the approach that will save the world. And the reason fundamentally why we're so lonely is because we've left God behind. We've alienated ourselves from God, agnostic, atheists, or just, self-help gurus who tell us that we're made for greatness, and we just put God off to the side. That's really the first step to why we're lonely, is because we're alienated from God. Excuse me. So I really think that God has the solution here. The world will not have the solution. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts. I've read a lot of articles on this, and the world does not have the answer. It just doesn't.
No, agreed.
But God does. And so I want to canopy the practical solutions with Christ's words, because Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And he has the answer because he is the answer. He is the truth. And he says in John 12:24, he says, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. So get this. We're the grain of wheat. Unless we die to ourselves, get over our fear of being vulnerable, get over our fear of actually entering in a relationship. Unless we die to ourselves, we will be lonely. We will be alienated. Christ is giving us the answer. And then he follows up by saying, he who loses his life for my sake, he will gain it. He who keeps his life will lose it. So what is he saying? He's saying this is the overall canopy to this solution, I guess, is that Christ is just saying, look, just get outside of yourself and give yourself away, whether it's your time, maybe a little bit of your money, but enter into a relationship, go to that group, go to that church group, join that men's group, enter into your wife. You're not, physically, but, enter into a relationship with her more emphatically, with your children, with your neighbors. Give yourself away. Die to yourself. Die to your fears. Give yourself away. And guess what? You will experience not loneliness, but companionship. You will bear much fruit. That's the seed falling on the ground and dying. So that's the overall canopy that I would like to frame it in,
I think it's great. Sam, I'd love to hear you as a mental health counselor. I know it's important. You have a one-on-one with a lot of people that are suffering from this. And so what are some of the solutions that you would like to make sure our listeners are aware of?
Yeah, and I would start by saying, there are situations where loneliness can't be avoided. Sometimes there's soldiers that are deployed. There are elderly people who can't get out and about the way they used to. There's times when there's different circumstances that lead you to greater isolation, and that's kind of a different topic. Maybe we can talk about that in Catholic Gentlemen Plus. But what I will say is, if you have none of those impediments, you have to reach out. You have to. I've heard lonely people come to me and talk about going to a church group or something like that, and then just standing there and waiting for someone to come up to them and talk to them, and feeling so hurt and rejected that no one did. And being convinced that, the world is a cruel, cold place. But it doesn't work that way. You have to reach out. You have to step out of your shell and engage. And what you'll find is 9 times out of 10, the vast majority of the time, people will reciprocate and they will welcome you right in. Unless you're just really in a toxic environment, but especially in Catholic circles, the experience in my life has been that when you reach out, people reciprocate. And some of our oldest friends as a couple, were friends with them because we saw them at Mass and said, that's a really nice looking family. We had just converted. We didn't know anybody from anybody. And we went up to them and said, hey, we just wanted to introduce yourselves. You have a beautiful family. And they reciprocated right away and said, why don't you come over for dinner? And we'd love to get to know you, and we're still friends with them over a decade later. So get out of your shell. You have to. The second thing is also look for people who are lonely. Like, look for that person who's just standing there awkwardly and go straight back up a conversation with them. Again, just like Devin's saying, you have to get out of yourself. You have to step outside of yourself and face that fear. Now, if it's something that's really paralyzing, by all means, like, get the help that you need. But I would say for most people, it's not something insurmountable. Most people, unless you have a serious disorder of some kind, can get out of yourself. You're going to have to be willing to make mistakes and fail a little bit. Maybe embarrass yourself a little bit. Like, that's just par for the course. But you have to initiate, and you have to just go. You see a circle of guys standing, talking to each other, go up and inject yourself into the conversation. Even if you don't know them, most of the time they'll welcome you in. The other thing I'll say is just family. So often family is considered toxic, is considered unhealthy. I just want to keep my distance. I don't want to engage with anything. But God placed these people in your life. Be there for them to the extent that you can. I mean, I know that it's a two-way street, right? Like, sometimes you try to be there for people and they don't want anything to do with you. To the extent that you can, value those family relationships with siblings, with your parents, with uncles and aunts, with grandparents. Again, that's broken down to such an extent, but family used to be a very important thing. And I'm not saying put yourself in danger. If someone's really toxic, you have to put yourself in danger. But for normal family relationships, reach out to your siblings, give your parents a call. And it'll bring a lot of joy to their life, but also to yours in most cases. So reach out to family and don't forget about that aspect of your life. God has placed these people in your life for a reason.
Yeah. And with the short time that we have left, I'm just going to add a little bit. I went to Christ as well, Devin. I went to a different scripture verse, the golden rule, if you will, that I think loneliness is suffering, right? It is a suffering. And as such, it's unique, it's individual, it's unrepeatable, because you're, as John Paul II, I think he called it the history of a soul or something like that, right? Like you have your own history, you have your own development, you have your own growth. And as such, it's often uncommunicable too, because of the nature of suffering, is that you can't quite express it to other people. So if you're somebody who is struggling with loneliness, I want to state that in the end, love is the solution, right? And so using Christ, who talked about, the golden rule is to love God with all your heart, mind, body, soul. And the second commandment is like onto this, love your neighbor as yourself. We've got right there three things. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. So we have to figure out how to love ourselves rightly, right? Not with self-pity and with pride and with, some sort of selfish gains. That's not it. And we get to talk about that more inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. You have to, in doing so, then you love your neighbor, right? And so you have to learn to reach out to friends. You have to have friends. You have to learn how to be a good friend, but at the same time, how to receive the gift of good friends. And then you have to love God, and you have to understand our relationship with God, not as a distant being in the clouds or above the earth, but as a very intimate, loving Father, as a very intimate, loving Savior, and as a very intimate, loving spirit that animates your very existence in your life. And it is in this love that solutions can start to be had internally for ourselves as well as externally. And I liked both of your guys' call to help the external, right? If this is not you, that you're struggling with this loneliness, but being aware of this, I think is so important, right? That's what we're talking about here is, hey, we're aware of it now. That's a huge thing. And now we're aware of the solution. We're aware of why that. I agree with you, Devin, 100%. I was going through different articles and just none of them are going to work. Little hug corners in downtown New York are not going to work. Like it might be a comfort for 10 minutes, but then what? You're lonely again, and it's because it lacks the transcendental. It lacks the truth of our existence as created individuals. So if you like what we're talking about, head over to Catholic Gentleman Plus. We're going to go in more depth today, but I want to get to this listener's question today because I think it's a fun question. It's about relationships, but a very unique angle. And so let's listen to that now.
I am a young man in my 20s who has been dating. I would like to hear from you men, what are some red flags I should be aware of while dating? And what would be an appropriate length of time for dating before engagement?
Okay, so that's a fun question. I'll just dive in and I'll just jump in and with some of my ideas here. I love giving dating advice. No, I'm just joking. So I'll start out by saying that it is a good question. I'm glad that you're asking this question. So thank you for sending us this question, because it's something that is in the hearts and minds of really every 20-year-old, 20-something-year-old, 30-year-old that's still dating, actively dating, while we're learning, and we talk about it so much on these episodes, how to better our own person as, a virtuous man of integrity and character who's striving for holiness. We have to understand those red flags or be aware of them when we're dating a member of the opposite sex. And so obviously I'm really big on you date because you want to get married, because you are discerning marriage with that particular individual. You owe her that. In fact, you owe not to waste time with her in the sense of just, we get along well together and we like being around each other, right? Like there really has to be a proactive intention in dating. I'd also say that one red flag is this inflexibility with communications in conflict. So my mind just keeps on going back to this idea of being inflexible. And so when you're dating a woman and she you guys get into conflict and she rolls her eyes or she puts you down, right? These are good signs that she's not going to be respecting you or who you are. And so I think that that's a really red flag. That would be a red flag for me. If she puts down other people that you love in life that have built you up and helped you become who you are, or she's wanting to isolate you from other people, those are some different warning signs. And then frankly, this idea of communication, right? In communication builds communion. If she is somebody that doesn't want to actually have deep conversations about children, about faith, about elements in life that are truly important, are everlasting, then that would be a big red sign. Even if she's a Catholic woman, I think it's important to be aware of that. And I'm not saying that she's immature because, right, maturity is something that we all grow into. But I'm saying that there's like this certain degree of inflexibility that occurs. And so then I'll offer suggestions, though, is throughout that dating period, I think it's also important, so where my mind goes, is to put yourself in situations that are not just romantic dating, right? Right. We have to put ourselves in situations of like intentionally babysitting your siblings' 5 children, like with her, like put yourself in these situations where you can actually experience a different element of life that's a little bit more connected to reality and less, just in the dating world. And so I know you asked another question of what's the general rule of thumb. I had never really thought about that. I would, thinking about it right now, I guess I'd say, 6 months to a year. Men, do you agree or disagree with that length of time?
Go ahead, Sam.
I don't know. Like, it really varies. I mean, my wife and I moved very, very quickly, but we were both ready, and
yeah.
But I would say we got engaged very quickly, but our engagement was a little bit longer, more like, we got engaged in like 3 months. And our engagement ended up being like a year. So.
Yeah. Devin, on that last question there, rule of thumb for
I don't think there is one. I don't think there is one. I just think
that's a good answer. Yeah.
But back to the red flags, I would say suffocation. Thanks. If she is suffocating you where you do not have time to yourself, time with your friends, time with your family. The other one is sexual surrendering herself. If she is giving herself away or trying to manipulate you into having intercourse, that's a sign that she's not upholding her dignity. And then the other one is that separatism where she's taking you away from your friends. So those 3 S's, what did I say? Is separatism and sexually, surrendering. And then the first one I think was suffocation. The reason why these are so insidious is because she's going to be all these appeal to your male ego. Because at first you feel like, oh, she wants to spend all this time with me. Oh, she's so attracted to me. She wants to give herself away to me. Oh, she just thinks that I'm so important that she just wants me all to herself. But really, all it's showing is that she's making you her God because she isn't confident enough in God to actually have confidence in herself. She's not saving herself for marriage. She can't have friends and allow you to have friends. She's becoming jealous or manipulating your time, whatever. So to me, those are 3 big red flags that are huge. It says, whoa, okay, we need to do if you really love her, great. Then you need to work with her through some serious, kind of like, okay, we may even go to therapy here because you've been wounded deeply, and don't hang a hat on a hook that can't bear the weight because I'm not God. I can never satisfy you. I can never fulfill all of your needs. I can only address them. And this is what we do in dating all the time is we hang that hat on a hook that can't bear the weight and we crush it. And then we go into marriage and we just kill our spouses with this expectation that they're somehow going to satisfy us. That's a lie. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So I think that those three, the suffocation, the sexual surrendering, and the separatism, separating you from your friends and from your family, that's a big deal.
I think that's great. What a great answer. And actually, just what a great question. I appreciate the listener who asked that. Sam, any final thoughts on red flags?
Yeah, I would just say pay attention to fundamental values. People are different, right? I like spicy food. My wife doesn't. Like we have different, habits and tendencies, but we have a deep alignment on what matters, on the way that we're raising our children, on how many, how large we wanted our family, how we were trusting God's providence in this area of our life or that area of our life. We had shared faith. On the things that matter, we have a deep alignment. Then all the other stuff we can work through doesn't really matter that much, but that core alignment is there. So a big red flag for me would be, differences in faith. There are many wonderful Protestant girls, but like you don't want to marry someone on the off chance that they're going to convert, right? Likewise, like maybe they don't have any faith at all, or maybe they don't take it as seriously as you do, or whatever. And maybe they want like one kid and you want a big Catholic family or whatever. Like those values around money, around faith, around how you raise your kids, like all of those things are deeply important. And if you don't see eye to eye on that, there's going to be big friction for you in the future. It's going to be a crack in the foundation of your marriage. So really pay attention to that. And yeah, I think, of course, everything else everyone else said is vitally important too. But I would just, also watch out for just a general sense of mistrust. If you find yourself suspicious of her all the time, if you don't feel like you can trust yourself with this person, that they're going to live with integrity, that they're not talking to people on the side or like things like that. If you just find yourself anxious around them all the time, well, part of that might be you. Like part of that might be something you need to work through, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like even if you do feel generally like centered and confident in yourself, but just that person just triggers something in you, that's something you need to have a conversation about and like really get to the bottom of what's going on there. Because you need to be able to trust someone that you're going to move forward in life with, that you want that person in your corner no matter what. And if there's any doubt about that, that needs to be something you need to work through.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. So thank you for that question. If you have a question, send it to us, putting podcast at CatholicGentleman.com. We would love to answer it. So here at the end of the episode, we like to put on the new man. This is a challenge for men. I just have a simple challenge this week. Find a friend in your life and reach out to them over the phone and try and set up a time to get together. So don't text them, right? Let's make this more personal and get together with them. That's the challenge for this 7 days is find time. If you are married, ask your wife what day, what evening works the best, and then find an opportunity to reach out to a man in your life. Because if Devin's, friends are an analogy or a resemblance of the other friends, right? 0 times a week is very often. And I would say that for me too, it's maybe once or twice a month is when I'm getting together with friends. So I think that's really important. Well, thanks for listening to us on today's public edition of the episode. We're head over to Catholic Gentleman Plus to hear more of it. And as we end each of our episodes,
be a man, be a saint.